joining us. How about you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Grace. My name's Grace Rickman. I graduated from Georgia College in May. And I loved my experience at Georgia College. I actually came in planning on transferring to Georgia, and I'm so glad I didn't because I really believe that a lot of the opportunities that I had came from Georgia College. And I think as a transfer student at Georgia, it would have looked a lot different. Um, but my first year got kicked out of the dorms because of COVID. And then 2 summers later, so after my sophomore year, I did the GC and DC program, which was such a gift. It was one of the most rewarding programs that I was able to do. Would totally recommend it. So I interned for Milledgeville's congressman at that time, which was Congressman Jody Heiss, and I loved it. I totally fell in love with DC, fell in love with working on Capitol Hill. And I'm just so grateful for my experience. And it just opened up a whole world of opportunities that I didn't expect, that I had no idea. I was fascinated by government, and I was fascinated by, DC and the news, and I loved politics, but I never really thought that outside of a campaign that you would have a career in politics, if that makes sense, unless you were running for office. And I knew that wasn't in the cards for me. So anyways, it was really awesome. And in that internship, I answered phones, got yelled at by constituents. I got to run errands. I got to see congressmen on a daily basis and get to know, I met Senator Ossoff that summer, and I met Senator Warnock, and I met all the Georgia delegation, and it was just really cool and really rewarding, and it gave me a lot to talk about in future job interviews. So then that summer, it's actually really funny because I was up here that summer, and I went to a female chief of staff's event where they kind of it was like a panel of women who work on the Hill, and I went and I was talking to the person who was running the event. And she said, "Who do you work for?" And I was like, "Oh, I work for Congressman Jody Heiss from Georgia." And she was like, "Oh, I used to live in that district." I was like, "Oh, really? Yeah, I work for him because I go to school there. I go to school in this small town called Milledgeville. It's a small school. You've never heard of it." And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I went to Georgia College." And she was in her 30s. And I was like, "No way. That is crazy. No one has ever even heard of Georgia College." And she said, "Yeah, I went there." And I was like, "Were you in a sorority?" And she was like, "Yeah, I was a Phi Mu." And I was like, this is such a small world because that was what I was in. And so it was so cool. Then basically she worked for a fundraising firm. She did political fundraising. I came up that next year. I interned with her at her firm, and they run basically the fundraising for a lot of congressional candidates. So they do Senator Ted Cruz's fundraising, Senator Tommy Tuberville. They did, now Speaker Mike Johnson, they do their fundraising, and a bunch of a vast variety of members. So I got to do that, which was really awesome. And it was just such a different side because the campaign side and the political side are very separate. And so if you're working on the Hill, you really don't see much of the campaign side. It's like an ethics violation. So anyways, that was a really interesting side of DC, but I knew I wanted to work on the Hill. So after I went back to school, I worked on a campaign. I finished up at Georgia College. I was a political science major with a minor in rhetoric, which I think made me a lot more comfortable speaking up for myself and speaking up in class and speaking up, just talking. So
That's a pretty good combo.
I loved my rhetoric minor. It was such a gift. I loved all my professors. I loved that so much. And then, so then I graduated, and everyone said, if you can't start tomorrow on Capitol Hill, they'll find someone who can. So you've got to move up without a job and then find one, which is a scary thing to convince your family that you should just move up without a job. I didn't sign a lease or anything like that, but I moved up, stayed with a family friend, basically networked every single day, would have 10 or 15 coffee meetings a day to just network and talk to people that I had met the 2 summers before. And in 2 weeks, I found a job, and here I am. And so I work for Congressman Rich McCormick, and he's Georgia 6. So, a lot of the district goes to Georgia College, and it's Milton, Alpharetta, Forsyth County, parts of Cobb, Dawson, and part of Fulton. So it's a really great district. And my job is it's called a staff assistant. So I manage the intern program. So I interview interns, I equip interns. I like to connect my interns and friends across just in other offices or depending on what they want to do. And yeah, so I also just run the front office. So we have constituents that come in, every day to take a Capitol tour. I run the tour coordinating program. Constituents will come in and have a tour. I'll give them tours sometimes. I will just kind of do managing front office. So this is sort of the entry level job that you have on Capitol Hill. But then recently our director or our scheduler, every congressman, none of them run their own schedule. So they have someone who does that for them. So I was an interim scheduler the past couple of weeks. So I've been kind of swamped with, running the congressman's schedule. So that was also really interesting and scary. And, I'm like visiting my best friend in New York and I'm walking down the streets of Manhattan and the congressman calls me and it's like, hey, my hotel is messed up. Like, what do I do? And I was like, what do I do? Like, I don't know. But it was fine. We have a great office when they are very supportive and kind and gracious to me, and the fact that I kind of got thrown into this. But at the same time, it opened my eyes to a cool position that I got to see the day-to-day of scheduling, which is another side of the office. So I want to go the route of the legislative side, which is there's 2/3 parts of a congressional office. So you have, and it's pretty standard for every member of Congress, pretty much has this layout. So you have your legislative side and then your communication side. So like I tell a lot of my friends who love politics and are, mass comm majors that they should move up to DC and work for a congressman and run their Twitter account and, write their press releases and write their media, coordinate with media outlets. And that's a huge side of this. But then the other side is the legislative side where they have different policy issues assigned to them. So we have like a military legislative assistant. So he has 2 of our committees where, foreign affairs and like veterans issues. And then we have like our ag staffer or our healthcare staffer. So yeah, so those are kind of the 2 sides. And then you can do like operations, which is like scheduling, but there's normally only one of those in an office and maybe like 5 ledge staffers and, 3 people in the comms shop. So it's really awesome. And I love DC and I love working on Capitol Hill and I love, putting a lot of the things that I learned at Georgia College into action, but I don't think I know for a fact I wouldn't have had any of this. I think if I had transferred, it would have been harder to, apply for an internship in a Capitol Hill setting. Yeah, I would have a lot more competition. And so there's that. I think it's unique that I came from Georgia College. A lot of people haven't heard of it, but so that is a humbling part about being like, oh, where? Like, oh, Georgia State, Georgia Southern? No, Georgia College and State University. But it's also really special because there's so many Georgia people up here, like just from the state of Georgia, not just UGA. So it's really special to kind of get to meet with all of those people. And it's always special to see a, Georgia College person. So I want to grow that. I want to grow the amount of Georgia College people who are in DC and are working in politics. And I think it's important for us to like put our name on the map. That's my dream, is to have like a full alumni association here and have alumni nights and stuff like that. So
remind me to send you some email addresses because I think there's at least 3 of y'all up there.
I know I know a couple. I think I know 2 of the 3. And so I've been trying to get involved with the alumni association because I worked in the university advancement office, but my dream is for Georgia College to have a bunch of interns up here in different congressional offices. And it's awesome because, the state of Georgia, it's not just Republicans, it's a purple state now. And so, arguably, well, no, not really arguably, but, it's a purple state. And so you can work for the senators. I guess yeah. So you can work for one of the senators, or you could work for a lot of the Atlanta members, or even some, Congressman Sanford Bishop is like the longest standing one in Georgia of our delegation. And so it's such a gift, and it's really special to be walking down the hall, running an errand and running into Nancy Pelosi, or seeing the speaker while I'm giving a Capitol tour, or being in, working in this office and popping champagne when we finally elected a speaker after like 19 days or something. And
just 19 days.
Yeah. Or like protests everywhere, which is, I think is really beautiful to see, you know, peaceful, obviously, but like protests of people coming here to protest and to you know, exercise their rights. And so I love it, and I would encourage everyone to at least do a semester in DC. You know, at through a GC and DC program, you're never going to regret it. It's only going to look good on a resume,
Exactly.
no matter what you do. So one of my friends wants to work for the FBI. She did a Hill internship. Or, you know, if you want to work for an administration like the Biden administration or the whoever in 2024 administration, it's really great as a resume booster, and it's a dream to be up here, and you get to do so many cool things. So I couldn't recommend it enough. But yeah, that's kind of what I would say.
Okay, thank you. So just to backpedal a little bit. So for any current students watching, any extracurriculars you would recommend, any classes, any you mentioned sororities a little bit. So just, you know, how do you spend your time when you weren't, you know, volunteering or in DC?
Yeah. So for me, honestly, you know, getting involved in Greek life is a great thing. And just, I mean, in the sense of, I got my internship because the woman had gone to both Georgia College, and I mean, I, you know, applied also, but she was by me at Georgia College, and that was a really cool connection. But more so getting involved, just having things on your resume to talk about. You need to get involved on a campaign. It is so easy to get involved on a campaign. Go to a state house campaign, go door knock, go fun. Like I worked on Gary Black's campaign for US Senate, and my king, he's awesome. And it was so fun because I just got to call constituents all the time, and it was the same thing as I was doing. It would look great on a Hill internship interview because you would be able to say that you know, phone banked and you called constituents all throughout the state to tell them who to vote for. And then they would say, oh, so you know how to, you know, work the phones. Or so campaign is really easy. But all that to say, I was fully online. And so it doesn't have to be Atlanta if you want to work on a campaign. You don't have to be in a certain, you can do that fully remote. So that is a great way to get involved. I would say get involved in leadership positions, whether that's in SGA. I think that would be a great way to get involved. I was involved in my sororities executive board, but also, you know, I was involved in ministry, just things that you can talk about in an interview. So there's no really, you know, sheet of what all the to-do list things that you need to check off. But I think a campaign would definitely be something that, like, I'm interviewing candidates right now for our internship in the spring, and people have internship experience on a campaign, and they're instantly like at the top of the pile because, you know, you're meeting people, you're on the ground, you're interacting with, I mean, people throw so many things at you when you're at some of these campaign events, some of these rallies. So you know, you're definitely capable of managing, you know, a front office. If you've had campaign experience, you can juggle a lot of things at once. And so that would be what I would recommend.
And there's always a campaign in Georgia. There's always
exactly. There's always one. Even like state house. I worked on like a, what's his name? Rick Jeffries. I worked on his campaign just doing phone banking. I mean, he lost, but like I could talk about that in an interview. So
yeah, our legislature is massive, so there's always a campaign,
exactly,
a special election.
Exactly. So even just having that to talk about is a great thing. But yeah, that's kind of what I would recommend. And just kind of having a job and, you know, having stuff to talk about in an interview.
So, you know, I'm not fishing for compliments because I taught you in one class, or I guess two classes.
Yeah, two.
Is any classes you would recommend that, you know, you thought, you know, helped you prepare to work in DC, taught you anything valuable?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely talked about my election law class a lot, or elections. I forget what that was called, but it was by Professor Sanders, who's so awesome. So that was definitely helpful. I think I definitely talked about, I mean, I learned, especially nowadays, I remember a lot from our American or the foreign policy class that you taught. I'm forgetting the actual course name.
Comparative government, but it's basically just international relations.
Yeah, exactly. So that was great. But I think I took almost every class that Lamparello taught, and yes, I loved all of them. And even if I don't use them really, because I'm not going to law school, I still loved the classes and I'm better because of it. And I love the actual, you know, I love learning about Supreme Court opinions, and because because of that class. And I love,
You're
just
a
law
better
in
student than I
general.
was. I've never really cared about the sprint court. Never, that was
Yeah, that's so valid. Well, I live right next to it, so I got to care about
that's
it.
true.
And yeah, so I'm trying to think, what other classes did I take that I loved? A lot of my rhetoric classes were really great, like disaster rhetoric.
Impressed.
It seemed really random at the time, but like with all the wildfires in like Hawaii, for example, like all that going on and being able to realize, oh my gosh, let's look at the way that they're handling it. Let's look at the PR behind this and the reasons for it. So that was really interesting. But yeah, those are just to name a few, but I loved Georgia College so much. And I think showing up to class and being present and having relationships with your professors is like one of the reasons that you go to Georgia College in the first place as a small school environment. And so to take advantage of it, it'll only make you better in a workplace when you feel comfortable going up to your superior, because you used to do that to your professors all the time and just asking questions and being able to have those relationships with people and not being scared to talk, to ask questions, to question things. So I'm really grateful that I went to Georgia College and wouldn't change a thing. But it is funny going up to people that are like, yeah, I went to, insert Ivy League. Where'd you go? And I'm like, I went to Georgia College. It's in Milledgeville. You've never heard of it, but I loved it. So yeah, I wouldn't change a thing.
Wonderful. Okay, so we've already talked about internships and volunteering. So just anything else come to mind as any like final piece of advice to current students?
Yeah, I would definitely diversify your internships. I would definitely come to DC and work in an internship, or even, I mean, I'm partial to DC, but like the state legislature, like do one of those
That's also a
internship
great program.
programs. And also don't limit yourself to the summer. You can do a you can work on a campaign and have that internship throughout the year. And that's another thing to add to your resume, and it'll only benefit you in the long run. It'll never, almost never, depending on who you work for, but depending on what campaign it is, look bad on a resume, and it'll only strengthen your ability to talk to people, whether or not you want to go into maybe you want to go to law school. Okay, well, that'll look really great if you have a political internship. And I don't know, I just think that to diversify your internships, like I did a fundraising internship and also a political one in a member office, and I think that just gave me two different perspectives that I really appreciated. So internships are huge, and don't let a summer go by where you're not doing something at least productive that you can put on your resume.